Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. On today's episode, I'm joined by Josh Fineman, founder and CEO, that's Chief Connection Officer of Mensch, which is a community for men helping other men lead more fulfilling and meaningful lives. Josh spent years chasing success, approval, meaning, whilst silently wrestling with toxic comparison, self-doubt. On the outside, he had it all together. On the inside, he was exhausted, shamed, stuck. So we're going to talk about the turning points that led him to therapy. We'll talk about being more mensch and also how to live more honestly. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your childhood. What was the family dynamic like growing up?
Oh, wow. Straight in there, Phil. I grew up in north west London suburbia in a lovely home with two parents that as a child I just saw as being in love, with a father that I think I kind of idolized without realizing it, and a younger brother, and boy dogs and boy cousins, and went to an all boys school. And I think as a child I experienced my childhood as a really happy one, certainly for the first 12 or 13 years of it. And then really when I went into my teens, I think that's when I found things difficult. But I think that was largely due to secondary school than my household itself. So if I was answering this as a child, I would say I had an incredible childhood. I grew up in a household where money was plentiful, never had to really worry about money, where there was a lot of joy in the household. And it's only really in adulthood when I have processed maybe 25 years of not feeling whole or aligned that I've recognized that there were some things that were missing in that household, not through any fault of my parents or my brother or anything. It's just that, everyone works with the tools that they have. So now when I look back, actually, there was a lot of unprocessed grief in my household. Both of my parents lost siblings very young. On my mum's side, she was one of three kids, and her eldest sister died in her early 20s. And for the last 6 or 7 years, she was severely handicapped. So my mum had to take on almost like a motherly role as well as an older sister role, and that's naturally going to have an impact on you. My father, his older brother died when my dad was 22 in a car crash very suddenly, and my dad was in the family business with his dad and his brother. And so my dad had to take on his parents' grief and run the business because his dad couldn't cope, and kind of buried his head in his work, and did very, very well because of it. And so my parents supported each other through all of that, but then naturally, from a pure place of wanting to survive, I don't think ever really properly processed that. And therefore, there was a lot of stuff in the household that no one knew was there. And as someone who is a deep feeler and deep thinker, what I now recognize is that I was absorbing all of this sadness and melancholy. And then when I went into teens, I think that really started coming out, but I didn't really know who to share it with. So anyway, there's a lot more to unpack there, but I would say that's a bit of what I now see taking part. But I think, as I said, part of my journey has been really going through the process of recognizing, then being really angry and resentful, and then really seeing that everyone, as I said, is just trying the best with the tools they have, and letting go of it and forgiving and healing from there.
So you were absorbing this, perhaps subconsciously, and then you talk about this kind of sense of comparison, creeping in. How did that manifest?
Well, as I said, I went to an all boys independent school, and there was a period up till about 7 or 8 years old, I think, where that didn't really exist for me. And it felt very much like we were a band of brothers all in it together. And then it started off with grades, and then it was sport, and then it was girls. And then as it moved into young adulthood, there was also like how popular you were, what your body looked like. And then it was getting with girls and sex and exploring myself sexually, comparing to others. And then it was career and money. And so it just kind of grew and exploded from childhood. And I think also having a younger brother who was quite close in age, as the older brother, I excelled as a young boy. And then when things started to switch, when I found things difficult that he found easy, and the things that he was finding difficult and I found easy in childhood stopped being as important, I think that had a bit of an impact on me as well. So I carried that around. And then layered on top of that, I wanted to prove myself to my dad for so many years. And my dad worked and made money and supported people by giving financially and being generous that way. And therefore, moving into manhood and adulthood and feeling like I wasn't able to provide in the way that I was provided for a long time was really difficult. So comparison came up in all shapes and sizes.
And do you think that was linked to what you were talking about earlier, which is, absorbing a lot of unresolved grief? Do you think those two things, are linked?
Well, I certainly think that the way I adapted and survived as a child was to be the golden child. My brother, my dad worked a lot, and it's funny when I had memories of my dad from childhood, they were all really wonderful, lovely memories. Us playing football, him taking me to football, reading stories, playing games in the car with me and my brother. But the reality is that he wasn't necessarily there all the time. He traveled a lot. He went to work before we woke up. He got back a lot of the time either just for dinner or after dinner. So he wasn't really around. So I think as a child, it was really me, my brother and my mum a lot of the time. And my mum found motherhood hard. Like she had two very energetic boys, and my younger brother was a handful and was a rebel and always has been. And so because she needed to control us and we weren't controllable and he particularly wasn't, she would get upset and angry. And I think as the older sibling, I decided unconsciously that I was going to be the good boy because I didn't want to see my mum in pain. And so I learnt that love was conditional, therefore I had to be good in order to be loved. And with my dad, because he wasn't there, I probably asked myself, what could I do to prove that I could be loved by my dad? And I saw where my dad was smashing it in work and business and seemed to be loved by lots of people around him for being friendly and funny. Oh, I'll do that. And so I took those things on. And therefore, when there was a whiff that I wasn't living up to those expectations, either comparing myself to my brother or comparing myself to my friends, or, in adulthood, as I say, comparing myself to my dad or my dad's friends or anything like that, that really stung, because unconsciously, without me recognizing it, I was confirming the fact that I couldn't be loved because it was conditional on these factors.
So, you talk about this kind of escalation through to, into early adulthood, and you start working. So, and I know you talk about kind of doing lots of different types of job, and, how did that relate to then how you were feeling? I know you said you were comparing yourself the whole time.
Well, the thing that I feel unbelievably grateful for is for all of those challenges that I was facing internally. The greatest gift my parents gave to me was a lot of the time letting me try and figure things out. And because I had a financial cushion, I always, from a young age, I was always a people's person. I always loved either putting on events or sitting down with someone and having a deep conversation or connecting on a human level. And I think a lot of that got lost in my teenage years when I discovered weed and booze, and the golden child kind of left for the kid who just wanted to kind of numb out all of his fears and sadness. And I say this, I do want to caveat, I had some wonderful times as well. I wasn't clinically depressed. I wasn't on the edge. I've never been had any particular suicidal thoughts. It's just there's been this melancholic thing in the background. And actually what I learned from my mum and my dad did the same job his whole life. And my dad loved his work. And all of my parents and family loved what they did for their work. My mum was an actress, and she was very she did lots of things that were very creative in that space. My grandparents ran nightclubs. My other grandparents started their own business. My dad went into the family business. It was a very big part of what it meant to be purposeful, is to love what you do. So I had this thing inside of me, which was like, I want to do something I absolutely love. And I fortunately have the financial means that I can go and test that out. And that was kind of on the one side. And on the other side, there was this, I call it the accelerator and the brake. On the other side was the brake, which is, well, if you don't succeed and do it well, you're a failure and you won't be loved. So I really zigzagged through my career because I was on a quest for purpose, but I stuck around longer than I needed to in places because I didn't like the idea that I was failing at what I was doing. So, I mean, if you go on my LinkedIn, you'll see, like, I did a 3-month stint for a charity running events, wasn't for me, then went into trading and finance because I like poker, and basically joined in the crash of 2008 and made no money and just had a red number next to my name every day. But I stayed there for 3 years whilst everybody left. I went into film finance because I thought I can't possibly do something purely creative, and that was just not an easy role, and it was finance with the word film ahead of it. And then I moved into film production, and I set up a creative agency until eventually I was like, oh, I just want to be with people, talking to people. I actually want nothing to do with numbers at all.
Was there, because I know you've since moved on and created a kind of community mensch. What happened between, you continually chasing, quasi-finance roles, and then you had an agency? What was the period between that and you having some sort of, what was the tipping point? What was a shift where you realized that, you were just kept running and you perhaps needed to address what you were running from?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends which version of the Hollywood story I want to tell you, because the reality is there's never a single tipping point. It's lots of little tipping points that got me to where I am. But I think there were two very significant things that happened in my life. The first was when I have 3 children. They're now 8, 5, and 4. When my eldest was about 3 months old, my mum got in a horrific car crash, was on the verge of death for 2 or 3 months in hospital. And whilst, I'd been around death in my family, both of my grandpas had died, I had dogs that died, I'd never really been that close to death before. Of a significant other. And it's interesting talking to a number of people I either work with or collaborate with. Death is often a part of the narrative arc that they're in. And the truth is that my mum was in hospital, and 2 weeks into her being hospital, I was coming back home, and my wife I remember she had our newborn son in her arms, and I had a glazed look in my eyes. And when she asked me what was the matter, thinking it would be something to do with my mum, I started complaining about my work and my business partner. And this had been an ongoing theme of our relationship for 8 or 9 years. And she'd stopped being my wife and my partner, and she'd basically become my crutch and my mother and my therapist. And it was really, really unhealthy for us. And I didn't recognize it at the time because I was just so enveloped in it. But now I look back and I really see how hard that was on her. And she just looked at me and said, I can't do this anymore. I remember with my son in her arms, she said, you've got to see someone about this. This just doesn't make sense. And it was the best thing she ever said to me, because I was like, okay, who do I talk to? And, therapy even 8 years ago was still quite taboo. And I thought like, well, I know I've got problems, but they're not that bad. And therapy feels like a bit like I don't know why I do it. But I like the idea of a coach. That excites me. And I suppose that's still linked to the idea if I want to grow my business. And so I found this really brilliant coach called Lara, who lived locally to me, and that kick-started a whole tipping point into understanding myself. And then the second real tipping point was 2 years into that, I was introduced to a man called Kenny, who's now my mentor and supervisor coach, and runs the charity organization that I facilitated with for a few years called Men Speak. And he introduced me to the world of men's groups. And because of participating in groups and being amongst men in a way that I couldn't be with even Lara, my coach, or my male friends, or my dad, or my brother. I could be it with men. There was something very powerful about doing that on a journey, shoulder to shoulder with other men, just showing up and putting the armor down and just letting rip. And it was, like it changed my life.
So people listening to this who, perhaps relate or connect to some of the things you've been talking about, the thought of going to see a therapist in the first instance, but then, going and joining a men's group and, showing vulnerability and let it all hang out. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with those steps? Because they're quite monumental for a lot of people, especially who have never perceived that they would need to go and see, anybody at all and try and sort it out themselves.
Well, I mean, firstly, I think I'd say that everyone is on their own unique journey. And so I wouldn't write a prescription like across the board to anyone. Like some men I meet, I say to them, it sounds like you've got some real trauma and like you need to, it might be worth speaking to a therapist. With some men, it sounds like actually they want one-on-one work, and so we work with each other in a coaching capacity. And for other men, it sounds like actually they need the power of a group. And for others, it's a blend of all of those things. And also for some, it might just be journal on these questions every day, and that my wife, for instance, like that's her way of reflecting. So I think firstly, for men who are in a space of I want something to change and I don't know where to look, I would say like drop the pressure that the first thing that you go to is going to be like your saving grace. The mere questioning of is this it, and the mere wanting to make a shift for me is 95% of the work. And then from there, what I would say is, if you want to do this with others, which, I personally took huge value from, and I would always recommend. We're social creatures. So having someone along the journey with you, or having people along the journey with me, has been absolutely invaluable. I would say just find one person that you just trust, you completely trust, and you don't just trust them in your head because they tick all the boxes of what you need, but in your body that there is something about this person that when you're with them, it gives you energy. And that's really what I've followed for myself. And that's what I noticed with the men who are with me, because for some men, we meet and it just doesn't quite click, and that's okay. There are lots of other people and organizations out there that might be better for them. But for the ones where we click, it's game changing. So I would say firstly, just experiment. Think about the smallest step you can take, the first conversation you can have. And then when you're exploring, just feel into how you feel around the people that you're with. I think that's it. What about you? What would you say with your journey? What's been a helpful way to know where to turn to?
I think it's just, you probably need to take a step into being uncomfortable to get comfortable. And you can sit there for years and think, oh, what if I could do this, I might do this. But just go and do it. And as you said, it might not work, first of all. It might not work the second time, but just that forward motion, and you learn each time you do that. That is starting to tackle. That's starting your recovery, even if you don't think you are, because you're starting to try and find ways of finding ways forward already. And so for you then, so you've gone on to create Mensch. So what? I mean, you've talked about how going to see. You're working with your mentor Kenny, and then getting involved in men's groups. So, what was what was then the next step that caused you to create your own community?
There's always been a part of me that's want to create and lead something, and I think there's a part that is the ego that wants to prove myself, that was there at the beginning, but I think there's a deeper part of that as well, which is that I know one of my superpowers is bringing people together. I know one of my superpowers is building trust with people quite rapidly. And I know I have my own expression of that I want to tap into. And so I had, 3 years of working within an organization that I still love dearly, and I recommend people to, if Mensch just isn't for them, because it's just widely available online every day. But there was a yearning to challenge myself, really. So maybe a couple of years after I left my creative agency, and I'd been doing lots of things. I'd been facilitating when men speak. I'd been coaching people in a one-on-one capacity. I've been running workshops. I've been doing lots of different things. I kind of plateaued with a bit of feeling lost in the woods along the way, which often happens whenever I've tried something new. That's really natural. And I felt like I want to, speaking to your point, I want to do something that scares me, because I haven't felt scared doing something in a while. And so I thought, what if I just ran my own group away from the safety net of Kenny and Men Speak? And maybe a few months before that, I'd been on a camping trip with friends. And I remember saying to them, do you think you can teach someone to be a Mensch? And just for context, a Mensch, it means a different thing in different languages. In German, it means to be human. But when I use Mensch, I come from a Jewish lineage. And so in my household and community, that word was used a lot. 9 times out of 10 used for a man more than a woman. But when someone called you a Mensch, intuitively what it felt like is someone said, you're a good person. You're one of the good guys. But when I actually looked into the word, it means something even deeper than that. It means to be a person of integrity. And if anyone has been in a men's group or worked within the space I now operate in or participated in it, integrity is just like at the absolute core of what this is all about. It's about being fully aligned, knowing yourself, aligning your actions with your words, being like fiercely honest, but being boundaried and being just truly authentic in all shapes and sizes, physically, emotionally, mentally. And so when I realized that that was the English translation of this word that had been bandied around in my household, and in my community, I was like, well, that's what I'll call it. I'll call it mensch. And I didn't really think any more than that. And the first group was really just taking the blueprint of what I'd learned through Kenny and applying it to a group of guys that I put together, a group of 6 guys. And then one group led to 2 groups led to 3. And then a year in, maybe 20 guys had been in this thing that I'd put together. And that was 3 years ago now. And really, it has been the most non-linear roller coaster journey of expansion and contraction and what the hell am I doing and where is this going, and this feels like it's a community to this isn't a community, what are you talking about, like no one cares about this like you do. And it's just been this evolving thing. And what's been most exciting about it, looking back from where I am now, is this thing that I was yearning for, which is my own expression of helping people and building trust and helping people step more into themselves. I've been doing that with Mensch unknowingly because I've shifted away from the original foundation that I was given. I'm not even shifted away from it. I've just added more things into it that feel like what I would want for myself. And when I'm often talking to other coaches or people who are thinking about setting up their own men's groups, I think it's really important to have some sort of foundation that I had. But really, the most important thing is asking yourself, do I want to do this? Not should I do this because it's going to, I can see how it's going to generate revenue, or because I think it's going to be popular, or because I think it's tackling something that other people want. It's really, do I actually want to do this? And the big pivot for me is when I started, it was all online. In fact, all of my training was online and it was quite international. And I realized after a couple of years that actually I get all my energy. I love online. I still do some things online, but I get so much more energy from being in the room with people. And so I started building in-person experiences into Mensch. And then in the last year, what's massively shifted is actually it's nearly all in person now, and it's all local, because what I recognize for myself is I live in North London suburbia in a place called Barnet. And as often happens when the best things happen, unplanned and serendipitously, if that's even a word, I bumped into someone in a park and he said, "Oh, you've got to meet my jiu-jitsu instructor, Toby." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "Oh, he lives on a farm site and he wants to run a men's retreat." And at the time I was looking to launch my first men's retreat and I was traveling like 2 hours outside of London to try and find a space. Turns out Toby lives 10 minutes down the road to me on 7 acres of land. He's a yogi, an acrobat and somatic practitioner, and our skill sets completely match up. And we ran a retreat together, and then since then we've done more and more and more work together. We've now run, I don't know, maybe even 100 experiences together in a very short space of time. And my work is based from his site and from connecting to him and a couple of other men. Shout out to Danny Newman and Barry Avram as well. I built this local community of men for myself, and I recognized that was actually missing from my life, a sense of local male community. And so what I've decided is what I want Mensch to be is tribes of 100 men who live within 2 miles of each other. And I'm building Tribe 1 here in North London. Now, some men come from Cambridge and some men who live up north. We've created other opportunities for them to still be part of the community. But there is something about having a physical hub in nature, getting men around a fire pit, moving their bodies, connecting to something very primal, but like unbelievably energizing. And then having the deep conversations that we were having online, but in that kind of environment that just like, well, I mean, like, even if no one shows up, I'm still showing up because it feeds my soul. So yeah, that's what Mensch is becoming now.
And so, you know, if I came along or someone comes along to your group, you know, perhaps not really knowing what to expect and maybe a bit wary of, you know, sitting around a campfire and whatever, you know, what in your experience, you know, what is their experience like? You know, does it take time or is it kind of like, wow, I should have done this from the beginning?
Sometimes there can still be some trepidation, sometimes very, very rarely. I would say the challenge I have is getting men to come to the experiences for the very reason you said, as to when men are asking, is this it? What do I need? In their hearts, they want to do something, but in their heads, they're stepping into the unknown. So there's a lot of understandable fear, and it's still quite this taboo woo-woo thing. And I remember when I first joined a men's group, I was like, what the hell's a men's group? Is it even allowed in today's world? So like, I get it. You know, I was there as well. 90% of the men, maybe more, 95, you know, I'm not like, this is an assumption. As soon as they come, and as soon as they're in that kind of environment, which is this safe container where they can remind themselves of something that they may have had once upon a time. It's the realization of like, oh, I'm chasing all this other stuff, but actually what I'm getting here, this is actually what's been missing, this sense of freedom and connection and depth and clarity. And then they leave like energized, and, you know, words like purpose are really banded around. And I'm not saying men come for 3 hours and leave with a, you know, knowing what their purpose is, but they leave feeling more purposeful, and they show up more for their families and their kids and their colleagues and their friends, and yeah, and they feed it back to me. You know, what even just 3 hours in that space can give them. So
is it about, a lot of it's about what, feeling a bit lost or unfulfilled, because that happens a lot. A lot of the men I speak to, you know, perhaps chasing career, having families, you know, and suddenly waking up one day and thinking, you know, I'm not quite sure who I am. And all those people I had around me have disappeared. I mean, is there a typical profile of the sort of, you know, guy that comes along?
Yeah, I mean, there is a typical profile. Generally speaking, it's men in their mid 30s to mid 40s, young parents, at that point of maybe feeling a bit plateaued, or actually that they've ticked all the boxes, like they've made a load of money in their career and they've got the nice house and they've got the wife and 2 kids, or they're in a, you know, any sort of solid relationship. And there's either lostness or stuckness. And I use this phrase a lot. It's a feeling of, well, there are 2 phrases. There's either a phrase of, is this it? Or there's another thing, which is like, well, what's next? Like, I need to climb the next mountain, and then pausing and saying, I think I need to do something about this, because I've climbed already about 15 mountains and I keep thinking the next one's going to get me to this sense of happiness, but it's not. So, yeah, lostness and stuckness. And I don't think men realize it coming. but there's a loneliness with it all as well. There's a carrying a burden that they're carrying on their shoulders, and only when they're in this kind of space and they feel that sense of belonging and, oh, I'm not alone, and this thing that I thought was just me, it's not just me. Yeah, that's kind of where the magic happens.
And let me ask you about, we go back to the beginning, you talked about your dad being a big influence in your life. Have you tried to bring some of those qualities into Mensch?
Some of my dad's qualities?
Yes, yeah. Or he's been you mentioned earlier on that,
it's a really interesting thing, actually, because I was talking to my wife recently about, it can be very easy as a child to pick out the faults in parents and where they didn't show up as we wanted. I'll say that from me. Like it, I have found it hard at times to see the gifts that my parents gave me, and I certainly also have felt guilty at not being able to pick those things out because I want to. And I was actually talking to her recently about both of my parents and the gifts that they gave me. So if I focused on my dad, and then I'll focus on my mum, so that she knows if she listens to this, she's in my thoughts too. I would say, like, the values that my dad has given me that are infused in Mensch is striving for something purposeful, and inspiring others around me. In his workplace, like when I talk to people at his work, they experience a version of my dad that I didn't get to see so much. It was a very inspiring leader. And he also, one of his greatest strengths is his humor. So he knows how to diffuse tension at the right time, just with a line. And, I know that can sometimes be a defense mechanism when men are uncomfortable in something, but it can also be like a real gift to a room to remember to see the lightness in life as well. And so I think I can bring that into Mensch. And also he has a real humility about him. I think that's one of the greatest gifts he's given me. Is he's done like pretty remarkable things from a business sense in his life, but you don't ever really see him talking about it. And actually, when he's with people that like to talk about what they do, it really winds him up, because that's just like not his style at all. So he's definitely instilled that in me. And then from my mum, I think I get a sense of adventure from her. And she also has a sense of family I get from her as well, like the importance of family. And what she does brilliantly well is she basically taught me how to bring people together and create an experience for them that they remember. And whether it's organized fun or festivals or family meals, putting effort into making something more than just a gathering, but an experience. I think they're the gifts that she gave me, that I put all of those qualities into Mensch.
So since forming Mensch and the work you've done, with men's groups, do you still feel that kind of, are you comparing yourself? Have you got that fear of failure, or are you fulfilled now? Have you come full circle?
I mean, I will always be on a journey, and part of that will be having a relationship with a voice in my head that's been inside of me for 30 odd years, telling me I'm not enough and comparing me to others. So it would be untrue of me to say that those voices don't come up from time to time. But what I would say is I have completely rebuilt my relationship with those voices now, so they don't take over. And actually something that's really helped with that recently is recognizing that I am part of something much, much, much bigger than the community that I do. I was having a call the other day with other practitioners in this space, and someone kept using the word movement. And I don't think I'd ever really appreciated previously that I'm in a movement of change, of making the world a better place. And I kind of described it as, previously it felt like I had an allotment and there were other allotments around me, but we were all kind of tending to our own allotments. And it was lovely because we could all look at each other and be like, oh, I like your allotment, and look at mine. And I'm building my little community and you're building your little community. And isn't that lovely? But what I realized last week is, yeah, we're doing that, but we're doing that because we want to oxygenate the world. So we're all building our communities because we're part of something much bigger. We are part of making this world a better place. And even when I say it out loud now, it's like excuse my French, it's like, fuck yes. Like, there's just such a huge sense of empowerment in that. And I shared that with you on our phone call the other day. I was like, you are part of this. And my message to men who are in that phase of, is this it? And I don't know what to do. Like, you are in this movement as well, even by thinking about it. Like, every second that you step into a room and you're around other people, and you can just make a small shift in yourself to be a nicer kind of person. Like, you are part of a movement as well. And that for me that's what feels deeply fulfilling and meaningful. Is that, yes, I'm doing it, and yes, I'm getting other people along, but like, it's part of something much, much bigger than me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it is, and I do feel this podcast is feeding that movement as well. I think it's a great way of looking at that. Josh, if somebody wants to find out more about Mensch, what do they do? Where do they go?
Well, the first thing is to visit the website, bemoremensch.com. Mensch spelled MENSCH. Hopefully you'll pop it into the details. I tried Instagram and TikTok. I'm not at all on there, but I am much more present on LinkedIn. I'm finding a lot of the men that I attract, that's where they are as well. So type my name in on LinkedIn if you're on it and reach out there. If you're not, then my email is on the website. Please reach out to me. And yeah, really happy to have a conversation with anyone who wants to understand this world more. And I say that openly. I point plenty of people in the direction of other coaches, therapists, men's groups, other spaces, if actually it just doesn't work out. So as I said, like, I'm part of something bigger than mention my coaching. So if anybody wants to reach out, then please do.
Brilliant, Josh. Thank you. Thank you from me and from everybody listening. Really, really great conversation. And yeah, good luck with Mensch in the future.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you for having me. Really, really enjoyed talking today.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you want to find out more about Mensch, Josh's men's community, and other activities, visit his website, www.bemoremensch.com. You can also find his email if you want to contact him directly, or you can find him on LinkedIn under Josh Fineman. To help raise the profile of the podcast, I'd be very grateful if you could leave a rating or review. Finally, there's now a book called Men Speak Up, Journeys Through Mental Health, based on the podcast, and it's available to buy on Amazon and other online retailers.